Welcome back to another episode of the Tech Vault with myself, Mitchell Sellers. Today, I wanted to kind of expand on the AI concept a little bit and start talking about GitHub Copilot Agents and really just kind of sharing some of the lessons learned and tips and tricks that I've seen over the course of the last couple of months as I've continued to, work with GitHub Copilot Agents, being able to be effective in getting a project set up to work with things, and just show you a couple of the kind of cool things that you can do. Really designed today to kind of show us a quick walk around and walk through some of the things that you can do with Copilot agents. And in future episodes, if this is something that was really useful, we'll gladly dive into some other key concepts along the way. For the purposes today, I'm going to be showing a couple of internal projects that I have and a few of the different things that we can do with our Copilot agents, and then also just looking around a little bit on how you can actually configure Copilot agents to be even more effective for your particular purpose. And so along the way here, everything is a real live what's going on. This episode is being recorded on November 28th of 2025. And I think that's really important with how fast everything is moving here. Be aware of when this was recorded because it may have changed. The buttons may have moved. A couple of the views that you may see here are going to be preview views and that kind of thing. So you never know if you go to look at your configuration, it may be ever so slightly different. So if you see something a little bit out of the ordinary, let's just kind of, come back. Feel free to post in the comments if you have questions along the way. I'll do everything I can to help fill in the holes. But without further ado, let's go talk about GitHub Copilot Agents and some of the things that we can do. So as I mentioned, I'm in GitHub. This is one of our internal projects, so it's a private repository. But the idea behind this is I've been working recently on doing a lot of system updates and working to update things to the latest version of .NET. As part of doing that, it is, as you can imagine, a exercise in repeating similar things across multiple repositories and really working to kind of get things done somewhat quickly. So what I did is I created the most basic work item that you can have. I had a issue that was update project to .NET 10, and I simply noted update to .NET 10, including project and build. That's it. I didn't give it any fancy descriptions. I didn't give it any insight as to what the project was, how the project was supposed to work, or anything like that. I assigned it to Copilot. And what you can see here is from just doing that, Copilot went out, did its thing. We can see over here, we have the information showing that there was a Copilot development process here. If I click on this, what this is going to do is open up the individual pull request so that you can see the pull request that was done. And so it gives you a really quick view to navigate back and forth into what was being done. And so keep in mind, again, this was a absolute baseline configuration. I didn't do anything different. I did not do any updates to the Copilot configuration or anything like that. And what we see here is that the pull request that it came back actually has a number of pieces out here. It actually shows, okay, it upgrades the solution from .NET 9 to .NET 10, including all projects, packages, and CI/CD pipelines. Actually outlines what was being done. Okay, we updated the target framework to .NET 10. We updated package references for all of the Microsoft packages, and here's what it did. And even gives you kind of a quick summary. Updated CI/CD workflows. And then it does give a little bit of a warning here. Hey, I was trying to go out and do something, and I was trying to go look at some Microsoft documentation. So more than likely, something happened that it was, needing to, be able to go out and it wanted to do some sort of a request. Right now, we have it configured to not necessarily be able to do a lot outside. And so one of the things that we can do here is we can talk about a couple of different things. We can either configure the setup steps to allow it, or we can go and set up our agent config settings. So for example, aka.ms, it was trying to look up something in Microsoft documentation, most likely trying to find something related to a update version or similar. So what I can do here is I could click on this Copilot coding agent settings. That's going to open up into a settings view for me. And what we can see here is that all of this is default again. You may have different configurations, or if you're in an environment that has further lockdowns, you may have more that you need to do. But we can see here that the Copilot agent, it has internet access, but we have a firewall. So it's limited only to allow listed locations, recommended allow lists, which are things for the frequently installed tools, packages, and dependencies. So this is what's really important. This recommended allow list is going to get you things like NuGet, NPM, etc. But it doesn't get you things like aka.ms. It doesn't get you gh.io or a number of other items. So one of the things that you can do here is you can go into your custom allow list, and then you can add in additional things that you want to be able to allow. And the documentation that is linked has a number of different examples. And one of the things that you can do is anything that you do with the domain, it basically adds a support for the subdomain and wildcards and things like that, unless you go through and put particular limitations on it. So for example, if I do https://aka.ms, this is not going to allow any other subdomain adjustments or anything like that, but it's going to allow anything after the aka.ms. If I go and do something like this, just aka.ms, this would allow any subdomain and anything after the fact. If I go and do something like this, it's only going to allow aka.ms/testing and beyond. So take this into consideration when you're going through and doing things. We know that aka.ms is used for a lot of things, so we'll go ahead and just add that to our repo, which will just make things a little bit better for us in the future. So go back to the pull request here. So that will kind of take care of things before. Not a big deal because it was still able to accomplish the job. We can see here the original prompt is also included so that you have some information on that. We have the proper fixing notification here as well. So you'll see here that the item is already linked like we'd expect. And there's this warning. And this is one of the things that's kind of important here. Let Copilot set things up for you. It works faster, does higher quality work when it knows what's going on with your org. Like I mentioned, I didn't give it any information about my repo. I didn't give it any tasks. I didn't tell it what my coding standards were, what my solution structure was. I just gave it a blind repository and said, go do this. It was able to do things pretty well. If we come in and look at the files that were changed, you'll see in here that it updated our workflows. We even have a custom shared GitHub Actions bit here that it was able to update successfully. We have our ensure.net installed step that it caught appropriately, more of our custom stuff. It actually found a couple of other updates that it needed to do from, sorry, I had made a couple of extra changes. I apologize here. But then it did updates here to the CS proj file. So we have the target framework was updated, as well as you can see the Microsoft packages were updated along the way. And then we can see here in the other projects along the way, we have all of the respective updates. So all in all, pretty good overall review process, and everything with a real baseline configuration. Nice and easy. I can mark it as ready for review. We can make sure that all of our tasks actually run. And then out here, we can also then see a few of the things that happened. It was trying to run a couple of different things where it wanted to run a action. And notice that these actions don't run automatically. you do have to go and actually approve them. So it will run against your build and make sure that everything works, but you have to approve it as a maintainer because of all of the things that might be happening along with your repository. In my case, I made some changes to the project, to this PR that was done afterwards to update some unrelated things. So you can see here that it had already ran. But at the end of the day, this allows us to be able to make things really pretty easy. Our project was updated successfully. Everything is looking good here. And we'll be able to go ahead and merge that in. Now, that was an easy task. It didn't need any information. So what happens if we want to actually configure? Well, if you click that button for Copilot to set up its own information, what it does is it actually creates a work item in your repository or issue called set up Copilot instructions. And it says configure instructions for this repository as documented in, and then it links itself to documentation that is out here provided by GitHub. Now, this is something that has changing so fast. I did a blog post about this about a month and a half, 2 months ago. The information, the guidance, the amount of detail that you needed to provide is different than what it was even a couple of weeks ago. So check this document out on a regular basis. Let Copilot guide you as well, because a lot of times you'll be able to see different things along the way that will be able to help. But we can see in here that we can have repository-wide instructions by simply naming the file .github Copilot instructions. But then we can have path-specific files if we want to say, hey, in this folder, do this with unit tests. Hey, in this folder, do this with the UI. And then we can do a whole bunch of other things for organization level, MCPs. We can even create custom agents over time. And this is something that is really, really interesting, and something I think a lot of organizations really need to look at. And this is where you can put custom agent instructions that then follow along. So you can have an agent that does unit testing or an agent that does documentation. And then this way you can really truly put some of the most detailed instructions in place to make your life even easier along the way. But definitely a little bit more on the advanced side of things. And we could definitely dive into that a little bit more. But what happens? What happens when I go and do this? Well, what we can see here is that now we have another pull request out here. In this pull request, we see out here, configure the development environment for GitHub Copilot Agent as documented in here. Repository actually had, this adds, missing environment set. So we had some stuff that was missing. That's why it had said, hey, I don't want to do anything. Other projects might be a little bit different. Now, it's important to note, this was referencing docs.github.io. Notice that we don't have any firewall warnings here. That's because that information is in that trusted generic allow list. So definitely something to kind of take into consideration. And so what did it do? What was its overall definition? Well, what it actually focused on was, hey, I need to have information available on how I go and set up my environment. And so the idea here is this ensures that when it goes to work on issues in the repository, that it already has everything set up appropriately. Now, as you can see here, we got a little bit of a chicken and egg going on with that other pull request that I worked on. But we can see here that it says, hey, you know what? On setup, I want to set up by grabbing the repository. I want to ensure that .NET is here. I want to restore my packages. I want to set up Node. I want to build my front end assets. Now, this is something I could say, hey, you know what? You don't need to worry about this or otherwise, but this makes sure that it has all of the information available to it. In addition to these processes, in a prior iteration, I had it provide a set of instructions that says, what do we need to do? And what it was able to do is identify all kinds of different things about the project. And you'll see this if it was a truly net new project as well. And it will simply say, okay, install the prerequisites, add to the path, build the application, do this. And there's things like, hey, we want to do, set long timeouts, run the testing. Here's how you run the application, expect behavior, manual verification setups. Here's how you do database migrations. Here's the development workflow. And then it even outlines a project structure, and it uses a tree process that says, hey, this is all of the stuff that we're looking to do. Where do you find key information, configuration, front end information, CI/CD? What kinds of things get done when it's done? What are some of the common errors, things that it might have ran into? What are some expectations on how long it takes? And so what happens here is this is the AI telling you what it was able to learn from its attempts at working to support your project. As time goes on, you're going to learn more about how AI works and how you're going to be able to, you know, accomplish those tasks as well. And so over time, the more that you teach your agent or you work with, providing the agent additional information, the better off you're going to be able to be with regards to, letting it do things within your repository and being able to adjust and manage things. And so with the right instructions, you can do a lot of different things with the overall process. You can tell it what to look out for, and some of those kinds of things along the way. And I thought I'd show just kind of one last example here to keep things short for today and just show, well, what's maybe a more detailed, instruction look like? Well, a more detailed instruction is where things get a little bit fun. So this was a global change I needed to make. I wanted to change any reference to this to this. Obviously, this is something that we could easily do with a find and replace or similar behavior within Visual Studio. But at the same time, I wanted to see what we could do with GitHub Copilot. And I apologize. It looks like that did not share here. One second. Let me share this again. So I'm going to replace any existing of btn-outline-dark with btn-outline.primary. Just something that we needed to do from a design perspective. So what it did is it came out and made a PR. It made a big set of changes. It actually showed where it was done, adjusted some of the things that it did. It gave me the notes about missing a configuration. I also found that it was doing some other changes that I didn't want to. So just like you would with a regular developer, I interacted back with it and said, hey, don't do what you did. And then it rolled back some of the extra stuff that it did. So for example, it thought that it needed to create its own style overrides. Didn't need to, that was already supported. So the idea here is I can interact with this just like I do with any human developer. Now, in this case, this is a really small change, and you can see here the extent of what it was is like 8 or 10 exact changes across the way. But the idea here is I assigned it something. It didn't do it quite correctly. I interacted with it just like it was a human, and then I went out to kind of take a look at it. Now, drilling in and trying to understand what the AI is doing or where it gets stuck is, I think, the last piece of getting this fundamental understanding with Copilot. And that is simply where you can go in anywhere that you have one of these sessions, you can click on View Session. Now, you can do this while the session is going on, or you can do so after the fact and get a little bit of insight into exactly what is going on, what the AI was doing, and where it might have gotten hung up. So you can see here that in the initial implementation, it starts up the MCP servers, that it needed. It says, hey, I need to understand what's going on. Let me start by exploring the repository. So it goes in, it looks at the thing that might, tries to find, hey, I want to find files that contain button classes. Now I want to find exactly where it is. Okay, going to find everything. Then it's trying to do a little bit of a more detailed piece. Okay, perfect. Let me look at each of the files, check, etc. So as you can see here, this is a really clean overall process. And then you can see here where it gets a little bit weird, like, oh, wait a minute, I didn't find it. It was coming in from, Bootstrap, and it's like, well, I don't know, maybe I need to add it, right? So because it's not doing some of that extra stuff, you're gonna be able to see it. So you could see here, if you were watching while it was doing this, you could have redirected it right at the time that things were going on. In my case, I waited until it was done. So then you'll see here, I then commented, which comes into this whole section as a whole. And then it's like, oh, okay, you know what? Because of this review, I took an extra 5 minutes to go do it. And you can see the same thing. It says, oh, I want to do this. And it even talks about it from a human perspective. Hey, what is it? Mitchell Sellers wants me to roll back the changes that I created, leave the changing, meaning actually replace the class names. So it took care of that, did everything else, let everything go, and it looks like everything is ready to go. And then it finished up at the very end, talked about some different pieces um, along the way. So makes it really easy. Please, please, please give feedback. If things worked well, if things didn't work well, give this feedback out. Let the GitHub team know what's going on, because this will help train these models and make things better along the way. But as you can see here, these are two examples of some fairly simple things without sharing a bunch of really, complicated private information. Obviously, a little hard for me to be able to give you a great example, but I can tell you that we've been able to send complete full tasks to Copilot and have it be able to do so successfully with no real negative ramifications for the most part. But it's important, just like you do if you assign anything to a human, you really want to make sure that you give it the most information you can. What do you want? What's the success criterion? Are there example representations of what you're looking to do? The more that you can give it the information that says, I want you to do this, the more likely it's going to be able to give you that initial bit. Again, I appreciate you watching today. If this is something that you find interesting, if you'd like to see me talk more about using Copilot and coming up with some specific examples, please like, comment, share, and don't forget to subscribe for future content because I'm looking to create a lot more out there. So thank you for watching.